So welcome to Body Mechanics 4, Pushing Weight. In this session we'll take a look at the timing and posing that you'll need to create the illusion of a character pushing something heavy. As you've seen this far, the timing is the contrast of speed and motion and is the key to creating convincing physics in animation. Clear and appealing poses communicate to the audience what the character is doing. Timing and posing and appropriate use of all animation principles, all in concert with each other, is what you need to create professional looking work. Alright, so open up your project file and let's go to our layout. So you'll see in your project file we have a stage, and your character is placed on the stage with this cube, and he's just going to push it off the edge. So we're going for something like this. So you don't have to have him take as many steps as I did in this one. He takes about 5 or 6 steps, so we don't need to have that many steps. I mean, 2 steps would be fine. Even 1 step, it's okay. The most important thing to get across in this video is the beginning part where he tries to push it and struggles. Just takes a step or 2 and then heaves it off the edge. Those are the things that are going to convey to an audience that what he's pushing is heavy and he's struggling. So that's the idea that we need to get across. So we're going to go pose to pose. In this project we're going to be going with IK arms. So if your character's not already in IK arms, we want these IK arms. So just select the shoulders and then go to your channel box under IK FK switch, just change that to 0. You can do them both at the same time. Alright, we're also going to use a parent constraint in this exercise as well. Alright, so let's get him into a relaxed pose, relaxed position. I'm just going to start it at frame 1. Okay, so something like that is fine. And we'll just go to our mannequin. This time I'm going to use the mannequin IK button. So before you even begin, you may want to create a new button and include the IK hands. And I have a separate button for him in IK. So I'm going to select that and set a key on frame 1. The first thing we want to do is we want to get him into an anticipation pose. And then he's going to make contact with the cube. I'll just set the next pose. Make sure that your poses are silhouetted. Arms and legs aren't jumbled up in front of each other. Okay, so at this point I have to think about which foot's going to stay planted and which foot's going to go back. So I'm going to bring this foot back and we'll leave the other foot planted. Okay, so something like that. As you'll notice in the display layers, you can turn the cube on and off just to get it out of your way when you're posing your character. Make sure it's a really nice pose. I'm just going to go with something like this for now. It's always good to spread the hands out a little bit before a character grabs something. It helps it to read more clearly. Let's just hit our button, select all the controls, and we'll key that. If we scrub over that, we have a 10 frame hold, and then we have about 6 or 7 frames into an anticipation pose. Alright, so let's cushion that a little bit. Let's just give it about 2 frames. 2 or 3 frames. And we'll just get them down a little bit further. Just get them down and back a little bit. Sometimes I do it in the camera view. And get those hands back a little bit more. So we're just cushioning this anticipation pose a bit. And I'll just key that. You can do a little bit more with the spine too as well. Okay, so we got this. I'm just scrubbing over my timeline now just to check that. So it just cushions a little bit. He's going to heave himself right at this cube. Okay, so we'll just give it 2 frames. He's going to do it quick. So you have to think the character's, he's anticipating this is going to be heavy. He knows it's going to be heavy. So he's going to try really hard right off the bat to try and move this thing. So we're going to angle his body. I'm just going to work on the center of his body first. Let's zero out all these spine controls. And then we'll just repose from the root. And just get the angle of his body to where we need it. So I'm just going to turn his head a little bit so we can see the crosshairs on his face. Okay, so even though I'm not really going to see this hand, let's make sure we're posing it properly anyways, because we might want to render this from another angle. So let's make sure that it's looking pretty good, even though we can't see it in this camera view. Okay, let's move this cube over a little bit, and we'll just get his hand. Just want to get his hand wrapped around the edge here so we see his hand. And that'll give us a little bit of a better presentation. It'll just give us a better overall look so we can see his hand there on the cube. We just curl the fingers around it. So we'll set this pose. Alright, now at this point what we want to do is we want to constrain the hand to the cube so that when we move this hand, the whole cube's going to go with it. So we'll use a parent constraint. Grab the hand. To apply a parent constraint, the influencer is selected first and then the influencee is selected last. So I'll select the cube and then we'll just go to constrain. We'll go to parent, option box, and make sure that maintain offset is checked, and then translate all and rotate all. So all the translates and rotates will be affected by the constraint. And then we'll go add. Okay, so now if you grab the hand, the whole cube should go with it. Should rotate and translate with it. We want that to come into effect right on this frame, right on this pose, but we don't want it to be on there earlier. So if we drag across the timeline now, we'll see all the animation we did, it's following the hand. Go to the frame where we set this pose and select the cube. Our cube constraint, parent constraint. We'll see this right IK hand constraint, and it says 1. So 1 means the constraint is on, and 0 would be the constraint is off. So right on that frame where this pose is set, let's right click over that and then go set key, or key selected. Go one frame over, one frame before that, and set it to 0. Set this channel to 0, right click on it, and key selected. So now when we scrub over this animation, the constraint's not going to take effect until we get here. You can see there it changes right at 1, or it changes from 0 to 1. So now all the animation we do after that, the constraint will be stuck to his hand. And then we can also turn it off later when he pushes it off. Alright, so I just realized that I forgot to move him closer to the edge. I don't want to do all those steps. So it's not a big deal. We can just go into our outliner and just get rid of the constraint altogether. So if you go to the cube, move, and just unexpand that 3 times, you'll see the cube constraint. It's shown with an exclamation mark in the outliner. Just select it and hit delete on your keyboard, and it's gone. Alright, so let's just move these guys up one at a time. Move this closer. Select your pause node on your guy here. Move it up close. Just make sure the hand is curled around the block there. It's not intersecting. And there's no keys on the block or the position control of the character, so they'll stay put. Okay, so let's go back to that pose. Let's select our character, and we'll go right back to the frame that has the key pose on it for this position, and we'll just redo that constraint. It's super easy. Just select the hand, select the cube, and go to constrain, parent constraint, and there, it should be set again. Yep. Just select the cube again and go to right IK hand controls, WO, and we'll just right click and key selected, and then go to one frame before that and set it to 0 and key it there again. So over one frame the parent constraint turns on. Just check it, go to one frame before and check it again, and you know it's not constrained because that hand would be moving the cube. I'm just going to turn my select surface objects off so I don't accidentally select any polygons. Alright, so let's just keep animating here. Then we got them much closer to the edge. So far if we scrub over our timeline, we see anticipates, hits it. Maybe we'll give it 8 frames or 10 frames. We'll give it 10 frames for now. This is just blocking, so it's rough, right? So we'll have him lean into it and just give it a slow push and realize that he's just not going to be able to do it, right? He's going to have to exert a lot more effort. So we'll get his back into it a little bit here. I like to keep his crosshairs in view. Sort of makes it look like he's leaning up against it with his face. And now we'll actually push the cube with the hand that's constrained. So let's use the translate Z in the channel box. Just select that so you know it's going straight forward. And we'll just give it a little bit of struggle. Get that elbow down. And even though we can't see this hand, let's just keep animating it so that it stays against the block, just in case we want to render this from another angle. Alright, so that's good. Let's set a key on that. Let's see what we got here. Scrub over it. Something like that. You can even get his chest into it a little bit more. Really give him a pose that really shows that he's really struggling. And then after that we can give it a little bit of a hold, or we can just go straight into the next anticipation. I think this eases in because this goes on so long. We can just go right into the next anticipation pose. Let's actually give it like a 4-frame hold. Try that. Okay, so let's have him anticipate. He's going to keep his hands on this thing. Okay, so he can anticipate and bring that leg forward now. Okay, so something like this. The anticipation can be, he can be stepping at the same time as well. Oh, we were going to give him a 4-frame hold. Okay, so what we can do is just middle mouse button over down the timeline, select all of his controls, and then just hold over that keyframe we were going to put a hold on. Just middle mouse button, drag it over, hit S, and that copies the entire pose. And then we can just go to this frame that we wanted to hold, middle mouse button over that, and drag to the next keyframe, hit S, we have a hold, and then he goes into that anticipation pose. So we just slid everything over. Alright, so he pushes. What we can do during that hold, what we can do is get his leg forward. So I'll just select the foot, I'll go to this anticipation pose where I have his leg starting to come forward, and I can just middle mouse button and drag back to the previous frame and hit S, and that'll bring it onto the hold. What we could do is just flatten the foot out, make that into a quick step. We'll just select the foot and the knee control. We just changed. Alright, so the foot's just going to slide forward, but we can put the step in the graph editor by breaking those tangents like we did before. So we're going to go to the translate Y of the right foot with the right foot selected. So we'll just select those two keys. I got my time marker placed right in between those two keys where his foot slides forward, and we'll break the tangent. You can grab both handles, just select the box for both handles at the same time and middle mouse button, drag up, and you can see that foot coming up. And that's just going to be our step. So if we slide over that on the timeline, you see he takes the step. So we'll get him at more of an angle this time. See, the angle we had him at before was something like that. So we'll get him angled a little bit more in toward the box. He's pushing harder this time. So here's his anticipation, then we'll just give him 2 frames. You could give that a 2-frame cushion as well. Right now we'll just go right into it. And we'll work on the center of his body again. So you want to get that elbow up so that it looks like he doesn't have to use as much of his upper body strength. Of course, it's all upper body strength. It's also legs, but with the elbow down, that would cause him to use to be forced to use more of his arm muscles. So he's really trying to use his upper body weight. So by getting that elbow up, it makes it look like he's trying to use his weight rather than rely on his strength. And it just shows more effort in the character. All right, so let's key that pose. That's only 2 frames down the timeline, so let's see what we got here. Alright, so you see him shifting his upper body right into this thing. Alright, so I'm going to go 8 frames down the timeline, and let's start actually pushing. So that last push that he did is going to actually have an effect. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to set a series of poses where he's just going to be taking his steps. And he won't have to take too many because we can see the box is already near the edge, so he'll probably have to take about 2 steps, and then he can just give it a final push. So we're just going to keep him in that pose and just work with his legs really, and just bring his continue bringing his root forward. All right, so let's step with this leg. So for these steps, they're just going to be really small, quick steps. He's using his legs to push as well, so he doesn't want any one of his feet off the ground for very long. And you want to keep this line of action through his body angled on an extreme angle toward the cube, because he's using his body weight to push it, right? So we want his body weight leaned into it as much as possible. So because we're animating him off the position control, you have to keep bringing these knee and elbow controls forward with him. All right, so let's key that. Every time I set a key pose, I always just scrub over on the timeline. I just scrub over to see what I've done. Okay, that's cool. So I'm going to go another 8 frames. We'll step with the other foot. I'm just setting a key there to mark it. Alright, so we'll grab the hand. First thing we'll do is just grab the hand control and move it as much as we need to. And then let's move the root. Just get him back, get his head back against this thing. And then we'll get that hand over. And then we're just going to slide that foot up. So you want to get it up somewhere behind his torso, or somewhere behind his pelvis. Alright, we'll just key that. And then he took a step here, but we didn't raise the foot. We haven't been raising the feet. We can go back and break those tangents in Y to get the feet to take their steps later. Let's just get all the steps in, and then I'll go back and do that. Okay, so he's taken. We're gonna have to get him to take another probably another 2 steps. That'd be too many. So I'm just gonna. I don't want to animate all those steps right now. You guys can go ahead and animate, 3 or 4 steps, but really I can just slide this back and just have him push it off, just for the sake of my demonstration. And really, if you guys do that, I'm fine with it. There's no reason for him to be taking more than 2 steps. Once the cube's about halfway off, we can just have him heave it over. So let's go back to our mannequin. We'll do one more step. So we'll do one more step, and what we'll do is we'll have it start to tilt. So we'll just give it a bit of rotation. You may have to shift it up a little so it doesn't intersect the corner here. So we'll just start to have it tilt so that it registers in his mind that it's going off the edge, and then he can give it a heave. And we'll just do the same stuff we've done before. Just get the hand in. And now we leave the other foot planted, and this one takes a step. So we can bring that foot up a little closer this time. Alright, so let's key that. And then he's going to give it a heave. So let's go maybe 5 frames or so. So we're going to have to put him in a pose where it's kind of like the launch pose, where when he's launching off the ground, he's on his tippy toes are still planted on the ground. So we're going to do the same thing, but with his upper body, and have him launch it, but his fingertips are still going to be touching the edge of the box. We'll do that. That'll read nice. The next pose is going to be the one where we shut the constraint off. So let's just get him into the next pose. And we're going to arch his back in the other direction. Alright, let's key that and see how we're doing. Okay, so let's get him to dip down a little more, and then he'll lift up. I'll do another 4, and this is where we'll get him to really push it off. Okay. So this might end up being a little slow. We got them 4 frames apart. I think I'm just going to bring those a little closer together. Okay, so on this one we're going to, on this pose we're going to select the cube, take that off and select the cube, and we'll shut this off. So what we have to do is key it at 1. This is our constraint. And select the cube and go down to cube constraint under the parent constraint. And then it's this control, it's this channel right here, the right IK hand controls. Key selected, and then you won't see it on the timeline. Just go 1 frame over, and then change it to 0, and we'll key it again. Key selected. Just over those 2 frames. If we just step over those 2 frames, the parent constraint comes off, and it's going to go back to where it originally was. So it's not a big deal. You have to look at the 2 frames that where you've shut the parent constraint off. It shuts off over 73 and 74. If you select the cube, you see it says cube constrain. That's it. If you go into the outliner, the cube constrain is the one we constrained it to, and then the cube move is the one that we can actually animate. We'll key the cube move on on the frame that we had the constraint still set to 1, and then just go to the next one, the next frame where the constraint shuts off, and just key it again, and now you can just move it back with the move control. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to advance it a little bit because he's going to go into his next pose. So yeah, if you scrub over the animation before we turn the constraint off, you can see it starts to accelerate as he's pushing it off, and you can see that the cube, as we scrub over these frames, the cube's moving. It's moving apart at a certain amount of space incrementally. So say these last few frames before the constraint shuts off. So at the point where the constraint shuts off over 2 frames, right here, we can just have it move. Use the cube move node to actually animate it over just approximately the same amount of space. So something like these 2 cubes, how far apart those are, do the same thing here. So when you scrub over it, it doesn't look like anything's occurred. But really we've got the constraint off. The cube now, we can just use the cube move node to animate it falling. We'll animate the cube after. We can just shut it off at this point, just hide it for now. Let's just finish the animation with the guy, with our mannequin. So let's remember that frame 74 is when the constraint is off, and I believe that's where our last pose is. It's at 73. Okay, that's fine. We may have to shift this last pose over to 74. Alright, so let's get him into a pose where we show some momentum moving forward, and then we'll squash him down and settle him up. So we have this next pose set. So this is the pose where he's got his arms extended at the furthest point, and he's given it the final push off the edge. Select this guy and key it. Now let's scrub over our timeline and see what we've done so far. So we get the final heave. Now let's turn the block on and just see how that's working out. Okay. So we'll animate the block after. So I'm just going to go about 5 more frames down the timeline. So with this pose, we're going to create some drag with the head. We'll shift the weight over to his right leg, and we'll just drag the arms a little bit as well. And just pose the arms so that we can get some overlapping action in this. And just make sure it's silhouetted. We don't want to have this kind of thing going on where the arms are placed over top of each other. Okay, so that's good for now. I'm going to key that. So let's scrub over and take a look at it. Okay, I'd like to have him dip down a little bit more. What we want to get here ideally for this motion of him recovering and settling back up is we want to get the head to dip down. We want to get this arcing motion. We're going to bring him down a little further here before he comes back up. So let's just get him down pretty low. something like that. We can overlap the head a little bit more or drag the head a little more. So I just move the head a little bit and just set a key, just so it sticks. So something like that, and then we'll bring him up to settle. So we'll give that 9 or 10 frames. Alright, so that's looking okay. He looks a little tired. Key that. And we'll scrub over our animation now. So he's the final push, the recover, and then the settle. And we're going to cushion that settle. Before I do that, I'm just going to get these clavicles down a little bit, just to help with the feeling of droopiness. He's tired. And then we'll bring those hands down a little. And we'll just key him all again. Alright, now let's add a little bit of cushion. I'm going to go 5 or 6 frames down the timeline. And we'll just bring him down a little bit more. We're going to keep this real subtle. We'll just bring everything down a little bit, just so he droops down a little bit more. And we'll just select him, set a key. And if we scrub over that, so he just overshoots a little and then settles back down. Then what we can do is give it about 10 frames or so, and give him another keyframe, just so we'll have a little bit of a moving hold here. That can be the end of our scene. I think what I'm going to do is select this whole upper body. We don't want to spline the feet right now, so we'll deselect the feet, and I think we can deselect the hands as well, and we'll just spline everything except for the feet and hands. Okay, I'm just going to have my graph editor available to me now. I want to take a look at what the feet are doing. So now I can put in some of those steps. Make sure that we smooth out or spline some of the animation curves. When his feet are planted on the ground, we don't want any splining to be happening there. So you can see that these keys are flat. I'm just scrubbing through and watching that right foot, and I can see it's sliding a bit here. That's going to be our step. So I'll just go to the translate Y. I know it needs to move up and then down again for that step, so let's just scrub over that, and we'll place our time marker right in the middle. I'll break the 2 tangents on either side, and I'll middle mouse button with the move tool selected, and we can break those tangents. You can do one at a time. I like to grab both of these, so we don't want that step to be too high. So that'll work, and then we'll do the other one. You just do it as we go along. So just select the other foot and grab the translate Y, and just scrub over the area where you want that step to be. In this case, it's between these 2 keys. So we'll just stop in the middle there, break the tangents on either side, and just slide those handles up a little. Take a look at it. And of course, you can finesse that further by going to the rotate X and breaking those tangents. Just break those, give it a bit of rotation as well. And I'm going to go to the next foot, go to the translate Y. He doesn't have to lift his feet up very high. These are just quick little steps as he's pushing something. In fact, his feet would stay on the ground as much as possible so he can use his legs to push. Okay, so that's good enough for now. You guys get the idea of getting those steps in. Okay, and then on that settle at the end we have his elbows popping here. If you scroll over that, you can see the elbows popping. We can just fix that in the graph editor. Let's go to the translate Y, and let's scrub over the area that's the problem. You can see it in the view panel here. You can look in the graph editor, just make sure the elbows don't pop. So I'm just bringing that Y key up a little bit. I'm going to scrub over and make sure that doesn't happen. Still happening. Really is all about going through your animation, play blasting it, taking a look at it, and really examine it and find the areas that you don't like, and then go back and fix them. Alright, so that's good enough for this demonstration. Let's just animate the cube. So we'll push it. Okay, so at this point, let's select our cube. I think if I just select the, that's the cube constraint. So let's go to our outliner. We want to get that cube move node, or the cube move control. So let's select the cube move. We're going to be animating with that now because that's the one without the constraint on it. And you can see our two keys here that we set just to counter animate the cube after we turn the constraint off. So we'll go from this point on, and from here we'll make this key linear so that it starts animating immediately. We don't want an easing or slowing out of this pose. So I'm going to go 4 frames, and let's just rotate this thing. So let's key it there. Let's see how that works out. So it needs to be in a little bit more. And then I'll bring it all the way down. I'll go 3 more frames down the timeline, and we'll move it quite a bit. So we want it touching the ground, but we don't want it to intersect. Maybe just a tiny bit, just to make sure that it's actually touching. And I'll key that. So when you're animating something heavy, a heavy object, it should really hit the ground quite fast, and then give it just a quick 1 or 2 frame bounce. So what I can do here, I'm just going to copy this frame over to the next one. So I have a little hold here. And I'm just going to give it a little hop on the second frame that I just copied, on the second keyframe. Give it a little hop and bring it over, just so it does a quick bounce on the corner. And then it can hit the ground, but it should slide over a little bit. So you have something like this. So if you look at the corner, you should have a little arc. If you just pay attention to this corner here, and when you scrub over it and watch, there should be a little hop, sort of like a bell bounce, right? And then we can give it a little 3 frame slide over. So we just have a little bounce and then drop and slide. So we'll just make those linear except for the last one. Shift select those keyframes for the tangents and linear. We'll keep the last one flat so that it has a little bit of ease into its slide. Okay, so it's sliding in X. You can see in the corner here, this is the X dimension here. So let's go to our translate X in the graph editor, and you can see this one's flat, like we left it on flat, and then we made this one linear. But let's break this tangent a little bit, and whoops, break the tangent, grab that one handle, and just give it more of an ease. So let's just check that out. We'll shut our mannequin off and let's just check out our box hitting the ground here. Okay, we can give it another frame for this hop. So let's just spread those out a little bit. Okay, instead of it just going straight up like that, let's actually rotate it a little bit. And we can do that in the graph editor. Let's just go to our rotation tool, and we can see that it's the rotate Z. So let's go down to our rotate Z and just give it a little bit of rotation, and we'll just flatten that one out. And the corner is intersecting the ground, so let's go to the rotate or the translate Y. So it's very similar to how we had the character taking steps. We'll do the same thing here. Just keep your marker in the middle, break the tangent, grab the handles, and give it a little bounce. We want that to go over a little bit more in X. Actually, that can be more constant. So we want that corner to keep moving forward. So I'm just keeping my eye in this area here. Want to do a little bounce, but keep moving to the right in X. I'm just going to play it. Well, that's not too bad. We'll just give it a little bit more of a hop. So I'm just going to take a look and make sure that it doesn't, it falls off at the right time. Yeah, it should actually fall. What we'll do is we'll just slide this back to where, a little closer to where we had it. So it probably, once it gets about halfway, it's going to start to roll off, right? So that probably makes a little more sense. Okay, so we're going to turn our mannequin back on. Okay, so I got the hand placed here on the box. I want to make sure it sort of stays pinned there for the next couple frames. So I'm just going to make sure that hand stays up a little higher. And I think this is okay. So I'll play this whole thing. So you should have something like that. It would be nice to actually get a little bit more on the way up, just get a little bit more overlap on his body, just have it drag more, and prevent those knees from popping as well. I'll do that. That's probably the worst of it. On the root control here on his pelvis, you can see the translate Y in the graph editor. You can see that there's a bump here. You can see that's causing the problem. So if we just flatten that out and we just bring the key down a little bit and just give it a nice gradual transition, I think it gets rid of that bump. Just brings the root up slowly. Yeah. So refine that further. Make sure you're getting in lots of drag, and just make sure your timing, get your timing and your posing really locked down and solid. And as always, send us your play blast just by selecting the camera. Make sure your render globals are set to 720 by 1280 right here. Make sure your controls are not showing in your camera view. You don't want to show any NURBS controls or any lights or anything at all. It should be just like this, where we just see polygons. Camera selected, and then right click on the timeline. Make sure you give us a 10 frame hold at the beginning and at the end for presentation, and we'll bring that scale back up to 100, and then the usual settings, QuickTime H264, and this time we'll uncheck remove temporary files and check save to file, and then just give it a name and send us the playblast. So that's it for pushing weight. Have fun with this, and we'll see you in Body Mechanics 5, lifting weight and balance.